All right, guys, we need to talk about Honduras because what's happening over there is absolutely insane and it's evolving right now as we speak. They just had an election 2 days ago, which they're still trying to figure out the results, who the winner is, etc. And we also had Trump just pardon one of their former leaders who's heavily linked to drug trafficking of cocaine. And these two things are not a coincidence that they're happening at the same time. And I want to dive in it and explain to you guys exactly what's going on here. So Ben Norton, a highly respected journalist, puts this very succinctly, and I'm going to just read a couple of tweets to give you guys a big picture view of what's going on right now in Honduras and involving our current administration. This is very suspicious. The betting website PolyMarket tends to be very accurate in predicting election outcomes. For the last 2 weeks, Honduras's US-backed right-wing drug cartel-linked presidential candidate Nasri Tito Asfura had extremely low odds hovering around 10%. But suddenly, after the polls closed on election night around 8 p.m. local time, his chances shot up from just 9% to 93%. This came after Honduras's left-wing ruling Libre Party published leaked recordings exposed a plot by US-backed right-wing groups to steal the election by hacking the electoral systems and manipulating the results. The US government has been openly meddling in Honduras's election. Donald Trump supports Asfura and his right-wing National Party, which collaborates closely with drug cartels. And here you can see a picture of the PolyMarket results, where just at the last minute on the last day, 8 p.m. local time, as the polls closed, you see the odds completely reverse and show Asfura at 93%. The presidential candidate whom Donald Trump publicly attacked and campaigned against in Honduras, Rishi Moncada of the left-wing Libre Party, has alleged that there was fraud in the November 30th election. There are still no official results 2 days after the election. The National Electoral Council website has not been working. Moncada revealed that there are major irregularities. For instance, there are 2,629 vote tally sheets that do not have biometric confirmation, representing roughly 25% of the total votes. Moreover, many of these tally sheets have more votes than are in the area they represent. Before the election, the Libre Party obtained 26 leaked audio recordings detailing how US-backed right-wing groups were trying to rig the vote. The Trump administration has been openly meddling in the Honduran election. Trump endorsed right-wing Nasri Tito Asfura and threatened to economically punish the country if the Honduran people did not vote for him. And here's a little brief context for the history of what's going on over there. In 2009, the U.S. government backed a right-wing military coup against Honduras's democratically elected left-wing president, Manuel Zelaya, of the Libre Party. Washington then propped up two corrupt regimes that stole the elections through blatant fraud in 2013 and 2017. These U.S.-backed coup regimes also worked very closely with drug cartels. Now, as you hear me read this, you should very strongly think about what's going on in Venezuela, because this is the opposite narrative that they're pushing about what's happening with Maduro and his links to drug trafficking in Venezuela. So pay close attention to how all of these things are connected: Venezuela, Honduras, the Trump administration. Donald Trump has officially pardoned and released one of the worst drug traffickers on earth. Juan Orlando Hernández, known as Joe, was the US-backed right-wing dictator of Honduras. Joe was convicted by a U.S. court of trafficking more than 400 tons of cocaine and machine guns. He personally collaborated with El Chapo Guzman. Let me remind you guys that El Chapo Guzman is the second most famous drug trafficking kingpin on planet Earth. And the guy that Trump just pardoned has strong links to him. El Chapo gave Hernandez, the guy that Trump just pardoned, a $1 million bribe so that he could traffic drugs through Honduras into the United States. Ironically, although Joe was a close U.S. ally, his drug trafficking operations were so enormous and had such big and negative impact on U.S. society that the U.S. Justice Department started investigating Joe during Trump's first term, when Joe was still the dictator of Honduras. Joe came to power after the U.S. government supported a right-wing military coup against Honduras's democratically elected left-wing president in 2009. That was under Obama and Hillary Clinton. U.S. imperialism is bipartisan. Washington then propped up two corrupt right-wing coup regimes in Honduras, which were run by drug dealers. Why did Trump release Joe now? Because the U.S. empire lost control over Honduras in 2022 when the left-wing Libre Party came to power. So Trump and Marco Rubio have been openly meddling in Honduras's 2025 election to put the right-wing National Party back in power. The National Party was Joe's party. It works closely with drug cartels. It is impossible to overstate the hypocrisy of the U.S. empire. The U.S. supports the worst drug lords in Latin America. Meanwhile, Trump justifies his criminal war of aggression against Venezuela based on the absurd lie that he is, quote, fighting drug cartels, while he openly supports the worst drug lords alive. Washington's closest allies in Latin America are and have long been drug traffickers. Honduras's Joe, Colombia's Alvaro Uribe, Ecuador's Daniel Noboa, Mexico's Felipe Calderon, Argentina's Javier Milei, and the CIA's Nicaraguan Contras. So the U.S. has a long history of doing exactly what's happening right now in Honduras, exactly what they're trying to do in Venezuela, which is kick out left-wing governments, install right-wing governments, and usually these right-wing governments are extremely oppressive to the populations of their country and very much linked with crime and cartels and drugs. Mike, what do you think about the latest developments that we just went over with the brief history of the U.S.'s meddling in these countries and just everything that's going on with the Honduras election, the pardoning of the Honduras leader, and even all the stuff that's going on in Venezuela right now where they're trying to push regime change? What are your thoughts on all that stuff?
I mean, it's clearly a big mess. It reminds me quite a bit of the show Narcos when it comes to the level of corruption here. Um, it is interesting to see the Honduran election just kind of swing like that overnight. I was not paying attention to this election at all. I thought this guy wasn't even running necessarily, and it doesn't seem like he is. But his party member, is now at the forefront, and everybody's going to owe favors and things like that. So this is just another case of corrupt leaders being corrupt. And I think we're going to see a lot of deals come out where they just use this to enrich and empower themselves even further. It's definitely crazy to see the hypocrisy when it comes to Venezuela, where we're doing all of this in Venezuela to supposedly stop drug trafficking and crack down on it. Yet here we're pardoning and working with one of the highest drug dealers ever. So yeah, man, there's a lot to it.
How is it possible that people are seeing what's going on in Venezuela where the official narrative is we're stopping drugs? That's the official story. We're going after, quote, narco terrorists, while at the same time we're watching Trump pardon one of the largest drug traffickers and links to one of the largest drug dealers on the planet in like the same week. How is it that people are seeing this, or are people actually not paying that close of attention and the mainstream media is kind of half-assed in their coverage of this? And I get this feeling that the mainstream media is kind of half in on this because this is all US imperialism. This is all just a huge cover story for a darker history of the US that I think a lot of people aren't ready to hear.
Yeah, I could see that. I also think that probably some of it also has to do with this flood the zone strategy that the Trump administration is pretty notorious for, where they release so many stories and scandals and whatnot that the media has trouble keeping up with what's what. Um, like right now, we're talking about like Trump calling reporters piggy. Meanwhile, he's literally like freeing one of the most dangerous people on the planet. So it's it's sad to see. I hope that a lot of people come around to this, like you mentioned, but I don't know, man. It is kind of it seems to me to be kind of widely unnoticed. And I think the deeper we get into Venezuela and Honduras and any of these South American countries, I think a lot of Americans just naturally kind of check out because they just think, oh well, they make drugs down there, and it's easy to believe the narrative because we've been spoon fed a narrative since like the Reagan era in terms of like drug trafficking.
The flood the zone strategy is definitely something that's been going on since, well, I think since Trump's first term even, but he's just amped it up tenfold in his second term. I think after seeing how well it worked, and yeah, it's true. There's just so much stuff going on with this administration that the media cannot keep up, the citizens cannot keep up, his own base cannot keep up. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Maybe not his primary motive, but it's just seeing that this is working. That Trump can do like 1,000 bad things in one day, including pardoning the leader of a country that's convicted in a U.S. court for committing drug trafficking crimes. I mean, evidence was presented. 400 tons of cocaine flooded into this country, and Trump thinks that this guy should be free because he was, quote, treated very harshly, while at the same time blaming the Venezuelan leader, Maduro, the currently elected leader of a foreign nation, blaming him for bringing all these drugs into the US, namely fentanyl and cocaine, which there's absolutely zero evidence of fentanyl coming into the US from Venezuela. None, not even an iota of evidence. We know that it comes through the Mexico and Canadian borders. Um, and also the fact that Venezuela is responsible for roughly 5 to 8% of the total drug trade that comes into the US. These two things happening at the same time is just the peak of hypocrisy. And I really hope that people start waking up to this, because even though it may not seem like it affects them directly, on some level, this affects everybody, especially when drugs really are involved. And that's the official narrative that they're pushing with, trying to stop drugs in the first place. But also just the fact that this administration can gaslight all of us so easily, that definitely affects every citizen on this country. And hopefully there can be something that can be done about that.
I agree. I think that my biggest concern with all of this is just seeing how easily the administration rolls out these kind of policies. Um, to me, it personally feels like they kind of test it in the waters first. They kind of go out on a little limb, see what the public reaction is, then they go out a little further, a little further, a little further, and eventually it's normalized. So now when you hear that Trump's blowing up boats, people are like, he's been doing that for months, and they don't care. Um, and now you've got this potential like election theft happening in Honduras, which people could go, that's Honduras, it doesn't matter. But if they can do that down there, they could easily do it up here. I'm reluctant to get my tinfoil hat out just yet, but for me, it doesn't look like things are going well in terms of how free and fair our elections will be going forward. I think we're going to have to wait and see what happens with the midterms, but until then, we have no idea.